Tonight on America's Hope, Jewish students around the country are concerned about the colleges they attend. Will they find acceptance or will they find more criticism and more threats of violence? We'll discuss it all tonight with Campus Reform. America's Hope starts now. From the NTD Global Headquarters in New York, I'm Kelly Wright, and this is America's Hope. We're glad that you could join us this hour, and we hope that wherever you are, that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Well, it's the summer. Many people are taking breaks, and certainly on college campuses, many people are breathing a sigh of relief that there are no longer encampments and protests against Jewish students and against Israel, and for that matter, against America. Remember those chants, death to Israel, death to America? Remember the fact that some Jewish students were actually unable to attend the college of their choice, that they had to be pushed out and pushed away by people who are students, who came against them because they were Jews. Something's amiss. Yeah, everyone has a right to free speech, but to actually promote hate of a person because they're Jewish, that is not free speech. That is hate. And college presidents were woefully, woefully inadequate in their response to the threat against Jewish students. And so we're discussing that tonight right here on America's Hope. Let's get started. Our first guest is Zachary Marshall, Dr. Zachary Marshall, who received his PhD from George Mason University and is an adjunct assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. And of course, he works with Campus Reform as well, which of course is a conservative group that actually looks at what's happening on our college campuses and how our colleges are impacting our students. And most notably, since what took place on October 7th, 2023, was a devastating terrorist attack inflicted upon innocent Israeli citizens living in Israel by the terrorist group Hamas. Since then, we've seen the protests where some colleges have allowed the protesters to denounce America, saying death to America, and to even denounce Israel, saying death to Israel. Well, what about the Jewish students who attend those colleges? Talk to me about what Campus Reform has uncovered in its investigations and reports on college campuses throughout America.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I got a chance to sit down with students at Northwestern University last month to talk about what they experienced at their encampment there. They told me about the physical intimidation they experienced, not being able to traverse Deering Meadow to go to class, but it's worse than just intimidation and harassment. There are students who at Northwestern University had their peers in the tent encampments tell them that they should go back to Poland, that Hitler was right to gas their ancestors and that they should be gassed themselves. So this is going beyond anti-Israel rhetoric. This is not only just anti-Semitism, it is outright Jew hatred, and it is wishful talking out loud of their dream for Jews to be either raped or murdered. And that is what students are facing across the country.
And we told our concerns to the university, like, listen, they're calling for an all-hands-on deck. They're calling for a campus-wide shutdown. This is serious. And the fact that wasn't implemented harder, policies weren't told. We weren't told what was happening beforehand and what security measures would look like is a huge failure. Second of all, the statement that went out by the chancellor, another huge failure. The initial statement that she said, it did not mention anti-Semitism. It did not mention the word anti-Semitism. And what happened, what else can we call it? It was blatant Jewish hatred. It was blatant anti-Semitism. We had 3 physical assaults, no arrests, and a message from the chancellor that didn't even mention the word anti-Semitism.
Yeah, Zachary, it's also indicative of the ignorance that's out there about understanding the Jewish faith. It did not originate in Poland. And let's make that abundantly clear, and that people living in Israel are not all from Poland. The history of Judaism goes all the way back to the beginning of the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been wrong on so many occasions and more than once. They are wrong about the history of Israel. They think that Israel is a Western imperial creation. It is not. It is a kingdom that existed in the Bronze Age when Palestine was created by the European colonizer, the ancient Rome, to erase any Jewish presence there in Israel. And it was carried over by the Ottomans and the British. But you will never learn that in classes, and you will never learn from the protesters in the encampments or from their faculty allies that there are Jews in Ethiopia, in India, in China, and there were Jews in Yemen, Iran, and Iraq, and Afghanistan before they were driven out of their homelands, and they're now in Israel because the choice was either to move from the Middle East or to be killed. And this is just part of a conspiracy, and we have to be honest about that. This is a conspiracy between student organizations like Jewish Forces for Peace, like Students for Justice in Palestine, their faculty advisors, their faculty allies, and the national groups like National Students for Justice in Palestine, all conspiring to make Americans who are not that informed, quite honestly, about Jewish history, to make them think that all Jews are white, middle-class, European Americans, when the opposite is true. I do not look like the typical Jew in the world. I am not representative of what a Jew looks like. If an American were to be planted into Israel and just look at Palestinians and Israelis lined up, they would not be able to tell the difference.
Well, you're absolutely right, and there are people of different hues and colors who are Jewish living in Israel. And to your point about the reason why people fail to understand, who's funding that type of argument and fueling that kind of vitriolic behavior and culture against Jewish students?
The National Organization of Students for Justice in Palestine is the primary agitator here in the United States. That is an organization that has links to Hamas. It is also one of the many nonprofit organizations that finds its way also connected to George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. There are leftist causes and international leftist networks of funding and policy advocacy that are finding ways to get resources and ideas and money onto these college campuses. Campus Reform has reported that there are now messages on the messaging app Telegram and others going around encouraging students to go to the White House and seize Biden's residence or actually storm the White House. And the students are going along with them because they don't know that they are stooges of this international conspiracy to upend the American-Israel partnership and also to incite a new wave of anti-Semitism to make Israelis unsafe in their homeland and to make American Jews unsafe in our homes here as well.
Zachary, I'm listening to you and I'm hearing all of this, and this is even, a lot of people will compare this to Nazi Germany leading up to World War II. But in some cases, some of the people that I've spoken to say it's even worse because no one could have ever pictured that during the October 7th attack on Israel, let me clarify that, the terrorist attack on Israel conducted by Hamas and some Palestinian citizens who were following suit, some of those terrorists actually used their cell phones to show what they were doing, and they called home to mom and dad and say, look what I'm doing. I just killed a Jew. Now, the people who are protesting against Jewish people and against Jewish students on campuses, are they aware of that reality, that actually took place?
Yes, they are. Point blank is yes, they are. But they also, in their delusion and their brainwashing, find a way to also ignore it too. The same people that say resistance by any means, and when they say that they include rape and they include murder and they include putting babies into ovens, all of which happened on October 7th, they also find a way to erase the experience and the testimony of Israeli rape victims who have come forward, whether from October 7th or after they were released in prisoner exchanges. They have questioned out loud and said that rapes never occurred, that the beheadings never occurred, when there is documentary evidence that's been viewed by international press showing.
I mean, Zachary,
that those
it's
things
on video that Hamas shot itself with its GoPro cameras and made a live feed to fellow Hamas members in Gaza to see and actually illustrate and show what they were doing.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, back to your point about the Holocaust, I've taught the Holocaust and how to think about it to college students. What we have to look at is two things. What happened in the 1930s and what happened during World War II when the final solution was in place. I think what's happening in America can be compared to the early 1930s when you had the gradual the gradual process of Jews losing their rights. They lost their right to go to certain places, to do certain sorts of leisure activities, to hold certain jobs. That can be compared to today when certain things can be said about Jews in polite society that are permissible now that weren't 5 or 10 years ago. We saw that with the presidents of Harvard and University of Pennsylvania in Congress when they said that it's context dependent on whether or not saying that Jews should die is a form of hate speech. When we look at what the final solution is, absolutely a comparison for what is happening in the Middle East. Israel is fighting an 8-front war right now against Iran, Hamas, and their allies, whether it's in Yemen or in Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the supreme leader in Iran just has now called on Twitter the college students here in America as a new front against Israel. He is telling them they are on the right side of history and you're the new front in the war to destroy Israel. So the annihilation of the Jewish people that was attempted in World War II is absolutely trying to happen over again in the Middle East.
We'll be back with more Zachary Marshall here on America's Hope in just a moment. Yeshiva University is seeing an increase in enrollment of Jewish students now, many of them transferring from top colleges like Harvard and Columbia University. And now there's a formation of universities united against terrorism. It's 100 or more colleges. Talk to me about that and what that intends to do for the Jewish students who are seeking to attend colleges of their choice and to go to those colleges free of any hate and free of any attack.
To be honest, I don't think it does that much because it's very similar to what we're seeing with the university presidents saying in front of the congressional testimonies. I attended personally the testimonies of the presidents at Columbia, at Rutgers, Northwestern, and UCLA. And they are making these platitudes about protecting Jewish students and combating anti-Semitism. But they aren't doing that necessarily. They think that anti-Semitism task forces or new statements will somehow make it better, but that's not the solution here. The problem is that, as was pointed out in the testimonies, that Jewish identity, which is hard for some people to understand because it's an ethno-religious group, has never been added into diversity training or into any type of sensitivity training in the first year onboarding process for new students. It has been commanded by external forces. A lot of times that's been lawmakers saying you have to add it in. We have seen that the anti-Semitism task forces at multiple universities are falling apart, and that happened at Northwestern. It completely disbanded after the university president there made a deal and negotiated with terrorists to disband the Tentacam in exchange for a lot of concessions this fall. That group is now gone, and we've seen a lot of resignations at Harvard University as well, because there's a culture there that is hostile to fixing anti-Semitism. The only time that the left wants to fix anti-Semitism is when we can also talk about Islamophobia and then forget about the Jews. So obviously I'm in support of the 100 universities making that statement, but as far as the day-to-day process, it is absolutely nothing to help a Jewish student get from his or her dorm to the classroom.
And some students at Drexel University have encountered problems. How is that being addressed?
It's being addressed insufficiently. So Drexel University students petitioned, and that's the polite word for what they did, petitioned the university to take Hillel and Chabad off campus. Those are two different Jewish organizations, which are community resource centers for Jewish students and for Jewish life on campus. This is a problem because it is both a form of religious discrimination and is also a form of racial segregation. They're saying we don't want Jews on campus. The university, to its credit, is ignoring and is chastising that request. But Drexel, I've not seen them do anything to proactively quell or combat the gall and the confidence those students have in making that request. There is something wrong with the way Drexel is handling itself, that it's fostered an environment in which students feel not only right, but also comfortable saying those demands out loud. For what other minority would someone think they could confidently say, I don't want these people on campus? That would never be tolerated. So while I'm glad that Drexel is not entertaining the request, it needs to overhaul itself if it wants to have a student body that, upholds the values of civil discourse and respect for difference and toleration for people who aren't like them.
Zachary, if these were Black students at these campuses, there would be outrage. If they were Islamic students at these campuses, there would be outrage. The fact that they are Jewish students being exposed to hate and even acts of violence and threats of more violence, and people stating that they want to divest from Israel. And yet there isn't enough, as you said, enough tough resolve, firm resolve to say this will not be tolerated. And it also seems that there is not enough effort to bring all of these particular groups together and have that seat at a table called brotherhood to at least start working it out and find out the common ground, the common good that all groups on college campuses should have for the future and hope of America.
I think you're absolutely right. And there's two problems here. One is that, as I've said repeatedly for the past year, a lot of people in higher education don't care about Jews. I've gotten a lot of criticism for saying that, but then I challenge them to say, prove me wrong. And the evidence does not exist. The second part is that the people with the power in higher education who are supposed to be doing what you just laid out and profess that they are trying to do have an outdated set of values and an outdated perception of how politics plays out on college campuses. They think these are all nuanced misunderstandings that result from multiculturalism and having diverse sets of people in the same place. The opposite is true. I sat just feet away from the Northwestern University president when he told members of Congress that he did not include Jewish students in the negotiations with the terrorist encampment protesters because talking to Jews would be too impractical. He called talking to Jews too impractical for a solution.
A college president said that.
It's on the record. He said it to the House committee last month. And, the president of Columbia said during her testimony that I attended, that if we could just talk together and do more listening sessions, that would be fine too. But it's not about not knowing something. It's not about being ignorant. It's everyone involved knows what they're doing and knows what they're saying. You have students who have been brainwashed and cultivated into thinking that being anti-Semitic and being anti-American is a sign of nuance and sophistication, and they think they are being smart, and they think they are being cosmopolitan, and on the right side of history when they call for the death of Jews and for the overhaul of American values. And that is what university presidents, right now, they are dinosaurs in this new reality, and they do not recognize that is what we're dealing with.
And where do you find the solution to this awful set of circumstances that have been unfolding on our college campuses and the disregard for Jewish students and their faith?
We need mass firings, we need mass expulsion, and we need mass arrests. The problem we're seeing as Campus Reform has been reporting is that a lot of students, at certain colleges are getting arrested, but then charges are not being processed. They're being let go. We are seeing, a lot of students, a lot of faculty members who are engaging in the tent encampments or in other forms of calls for Jewish genocide here in the United States be put under investigation. But those investigations are ongoing and never resolved. Very, very few, and very shockingly few people have actually been expelled from campuses. They are given warnings, they're given letters saying why it's bad, but that doesn't stop them from teaching classes. That doesn't stop them from being on campus to threaten and intimidate Jewish students. So what we need is complete prosecution, whether that is through expulsion or through more law enforcement to arrest these people. That is the reality of where we are. What is happening in Florida is great. I think Governor DeSantis has given incredible leadership, making sure that his public university system has a zero tolerance policy for this kind of domestic terrorism. And I'm very glad to see what the House of Representatives is doing right now. They are expanding their investigation into the funding of Students for Justice in Palestine, and they're expanding the investigation into 10 different universities, having about 8 different House committees look at the funding from grants and research partnerships and collaborations with other institutions, both in the United States and abroad, because it's not enough just to fire the faculty that are anti-Semitic and that would rather just have Jews die.
Do we need to start having education as early as grammar school through college that informs people about the Jewish faith?
I just spoke in Nashville a couple months ago to a large group of school board members and parents who are active in trying to reform K through 12. And what I talked about with them was that there's a lot of world history classes, different classes on different cultures, on different religions. Those already exist. We don't have to create new things. We just have to reform how we talk about them. And I think there is a lack of curiosity, and I think there's a lack of interest into making sure that Judaism is taught in a way that makes people understand how ethno-religious groups work. You can be born Jewish and be an atheist, and you can be religious but be a convert, and you're affected by anti-Semitism equally. Yeah. So that's where we need to see the reform happen.
Based on that, what is your hope for Jewish students here in America on college campuses?
My hope, and I think this is going to happen over the next 5 years, so it's going to be slow, but I do see it playing out based on the parents I'm talking to, is that Jewish students are finally realizing that they've been supporting the institutions and the cultures that go against their interests. And in higher education, they go to places like Harvard or UPenn because they think they should, but those are not safe places for Jewish students. We're seeing that really right now Southern schools are much safer for Jewish students and much more tolerant of religious diversity. So I think Jewish students are rightly recalculating what a good education means for them and where they should go, because they're looking at the reality that the professors at so-called the best universities are the ones responsible for creating cultures of hostility towards people who are born Jewish.
Thank you for joining us this hour.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back with more in just a moment. So we're focusing on what's happening on college campuses throughout America with regard to Jewish students and how they have been through the gauntlet of criticism and even, in some cases, physical attacks. Because of what took place in Israel on October 7th, Ken Tashi has served as general counsel for the Massachusetts Community College System for more than 21 years. He currently serves as a higher education attorney and consultant. He joins us now to talk about the problem on college campuses. We've just talked to Zachary Marshall, Ken, about some of the things that he's been witnessing on college campuses, for example, at Drexel University and other schools. What are you seeing in your area as it relates to Jewish students trying to find their way to go to school in peace and not in discord